Welcome to the Exam Room Live, brought to you by the Physicians Committee. Hi, I am the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll, and this is the healthiest half hour anywhere online today. Appreciate you joining us right here on Facebook and on YouTube. So here is the score. Today is your show. You steer the ship as we clear up vegan and nutrition myths that you have been wondering about. So helping us to cut through that clutter are two of the best in the biz. Dr. Neal Barnard is here with us today.
Hey there,
and Hey, Dr. Barnard and Dr. Jim Loomis also in the house to field your questions as well. Dr. Loomis, appreciate you taking the time.
Always a pleasure, Chuck.
All right, so let's go ahead and fill up that mailbag. Post your questions in the comments now, or you can send them to us on Twitter using the hashtag ExamRoomLive. Now, also today, it is Victory Friday on the Exam Room Live after a major policy change by the EPA was made that will save the lives of hundreds of animals every single year. And to help us celebrate our efforts and what this means going forward, toxicologist Kristie Sullivan will be here with us as well. Kristie, this is great news.
It's very good news, and I can't wait to tell you about it.
All right, but first, let's get caught up on the latest happenings. Here are your health headlines for Friday, October 9th, 2020. As COVID cases continue to spike in much of the country, more than 56,000 new infections were reported Thursday, the most of any single day since mid-August. New cases up more than 8% week over week, with rates climbing higher in 37 states as well as the nation's capital. That list includes New York, where levels had remained consistently low since the massive outbreak in the spring. Coast to coast, hospitalizations are up nearly 9.5% compared to just 7 days ago. In related news, COVID-19 patients with chronic kidney disease are at triple the risk of dying than other patients. The revelation coming as part of a new study from researchers at Penn State, who also calculated the risk of death for other underlying conditions. The risk for diabetes or cancer, 1.5 times as great, and slightly higher for high blood pressure. The risk of dying then jumps to more than twice as much for patients with congestive heart failure or cardiovascular disease. Data from more than 65,000 COVID-19 patients was used in the study. The CDC estimates 15% of adults in the U.S. actually have chronic kidney disease, while a 2018 study concludes that eating a plant-based diet would prove beneficial. And finally, in other news from across the pond, a new poll is revealing why Brits are going vegan. And often, it's not for themselves. The survey conducted by the Fry Family Food Company finds nearly 4 in 10 people who adopted a plant-based diet did so for their significant other. And of that group, about 1 in 5 stick with it long-term. The British newspaper The Sun also reports that nearly half of all Brits have tried a vegetarian or strict vegan diet at some point. So whatever the reason, 'tis the season to go vegan. Hop aboard that plant-based train, everybody. All right, time now for the doctor's mailbag and to examine some vegan myths. If you're wondering about anything related to your diet, nutrition, or health, we would love to try to get you an answer and clear up some confusion on the show today. So post your comments post your questions in the comments now, easy for me to say, or send them to us using the hashtag ExamRoomLive. And again, answering those questions for us today are Drs. Neal Barnard and Dr. Jim Loomis. Gentlemen, you ready to get right to it?
You bet, Chuck.
You bet. All right, Dr. Barnard, first question comes to you. This is one that actually is a carryover from a previous show. You and I were talking about it a little bit before this show today. And this is a question from Laura Ann on Twitter. She wants to know, are fake vegan meats okay? I love Beyond Meat sausage and burgers, but I can't eat anything with yeast. I also like Trader Joe's protein patties. So what do we know about those mock meats, Dr. Barnard?
Yeah, that's a great question. You and I were talking about this just before the show, and let me share some figures with you. But first, let me say that they're always better than what they're replacing. So if you're a meat eater and you go to a vegan meat substitute, a vegan burger or whatever, they're always better than the meat version of it. And I don't mean just ethically better and environmentally better. Those are pretty obvious. But from a health standpoint, they don't have any cholesterol in them. They don't have animal fat in them. They're not going to have animal hormones and so forth. But they vary. And let me show you some numbers here if I can share my screen. Can you see this okay?
Sure can.
Okay, so let's start Boca Burger. They make a vegan burger, 70 calories in a patty, 1 gram of fat, no saturated fat. That's good. Engine 2, great brand, pioneered by Rip Esselstyn. 140 calories in a patty, 2 grams of fat, no saturated fat. Okay, super. These are both great. Gardein, Amy's makes a California burger. Similar, not very much fat, really no saturated fat to speak of. However, The Beyond Meat company and Impossible Burger set out to really try to seduce meat eaters. And to do that, they packed a lot of fat in them, and they packed in specifically saturated fat to give it that sort of mouth feel that you would get if you were eating a meaty burger. And so what that really means is that it's not as healthful a choice as the other ones here. So how am I going to know? The way you know is to look at the label. If you're going to the store and you're picking one up, look at the little nutrition facts label. And what you look at is the fat content and the saturated fat content. Let me show you an example. This is an Impossible Burger. Total fat content, 14 grams. Once you're over about 3 grams, you're going to discover your weight loss is slowed down. Your efforts to reverse diabetes are going to be slowed down. And the saturated fat in particular, that's the one that's linked to heart disease and Alzheimer's disease. So again, always better than the meat burger and the cheeseburger, but you want to go to the ones that really minimize the fat and especially the saturated fat.
Outstanding breakdown. Thank you, Dr. Barnard. Dr. Loomis, coming to you for this one. This one comes to us from Kyori on YouTube. She's wondering about apples. She says, organic apples are not available where I live. Does the benefit of eating the peel, though, outweigh the risk of eating the pesticides that are found on it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that overexposure to pesticides and herbicides in the diet do pose potentially a health risk. Just as an aside, the Environmental Working Group, EWG, goes out every year and buys a bunch of vegetables and fruits and tests them for pesticides and herbicides. And they actually publish, it's called the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen every year. The Clean 15 are the 15 fruits and vegetables which have the lowest levels of pesticides and herbicides, and then the Dirty Dozen are the ones that have the most. Personally, what I do is if it's on the Clean 15 list, I don't worry too much about buying organic. The Dirty Dozen, I try to always buy organic. And then the ones in between, if I eat them frequently, I tend toward organic. Specifically about apples, apples tend to have a fair amount of pesticides sprayed on. But you can actually remove most of those pesticides with a fairly simple technique. A recent study looked at pesticide levels after washing apples in water, washing them in bleach, or washing them in baking soda. And it turns out that if you wash the apples in baking soda, you remove much more of the pesticides than water or bleach. And in fact, if you soak the apples for about 10 minutes in a solution of baking soda, and I think it's just a couple teaspoons, in a teaspoon or two in a couple cups of water. If you soak it for about 10 minutes, you will remove almost all of the pesticides on apples. So if you're concerned about the pesticides on your apples, I think your best bet is, if you can't access organic, is to just make a little sodium a baking soda solution, soak your apples in there for 10, 12 minutes, scrub them off, and you should be good to go.
All right, Dr. Barnard, coming to you for this next one. It's Friday, but Tofu Tuesday has a question about B12. They want to know, if my B12 is 1,000 milligrams a day, am I good to take it every other day or every third day?
Yeah, I don't know that anyone knows the right number exactly, but the amount that you actually need per day is 2.4 micrograms. That's really, really, really low. And so you go to the store and you think, let me find one that's that small. You won't find it. The amount in a multiple vitamin, pretty low, but 1,000 micrograms, that's way more than you need in a day. So taking it every 2 days, maybe every 3 days is okay. I would not skip it though. I would take it at least every other day, every third day, not less often than that.
A follow-up question from Karen. She wants to know, which is the best form of B12 to take?
Oh, what you're probably referring to is that you go to the store and you look at the label, and some of them are called cyanocobalamin. Others are called methylcobalamin. And my understanding is that the methylcobalamin, that's the one that's the physiologic form that your body would normally use. The cyanocobalamin is a manufactured product. I believe that the cyanide moiety is introduced really for shelf life. The amount of it is so trivial that it doesn't have any toxic effects that have been identified. And so frankly, you're okay with either one.
All right, Dr. Loomis, coming over to you. Going to do a little athletic myth busting here. This is a question from James. He writes, I'm lifting weights and I need help replacing chicken as my main protein source. I'm eating 150 grams a day. Can I still get that with a plant-based diet? Any help you could provide would be most appreciated.
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that comes up quite often. People, there's a lot of kind of bro science and mythology around protein sources, how much protein you actually need. A strength trained athlete only needs about 1.5, maybe closer to 2 grams per kilogram of protein a day. So, 150 grams of protein is a fair amount of protein. Now, if you can do the math. So if you weighed about 75 kilos, which is about 150, 160 pounds, then you should, then that's about in the right range, somewhere in there. But plants have protein. And in fact, the protein that you're getting from that chicken, where did it come from? It came from the plants that the chicken was fed. And it's very easy to get plenty of protein. And what's interesting is if you look at the natural macronutrient ratios of a plant-based diet, it's about 15% plant-based protein. It's about 75% complex carbs, 15% protein, 10 or so percent unsaturated fat primarily. And so what's interesting is that if you're say eating 1,800 calories a day, and that might be reasonable for someone who's not very active. That it turns out that for someone that size, that gives you about 0.8, 0.9 grams per kilogram, which is actually the RDA for someone who leads kind of a normal lifestyle. If you're in training, you're probably not eating 1,800 calories a day. You might be eating 2 or 3, 4,000 calories a day, depending on how intensely you're exercising. And so guess what happens to your protein intake? Well, it doubles. So that puts you right in the range you need to be. So for most people, it's really not, you don't even need to really worry about protein from a plant-based diet. You need to worry about calories. And if you're getting enough calories, then it should be very easy to get enough protein. Beans, lentils, probably your best source, but there's, broccoli has protein, whole grains have protein. It's really pretty easy.
All right. Lots of great questions coming in today. So let's, Dr. Barnard, coming over to you now. This is a good one from Kathy. She wants to clear up a little bit of confusion surrounding calcium. She writes, I recently heard that vegans may not get enough calcium, but I've stopped taking a calcium supplement. I'm 66. Am I getting enough calcium on a vegan diet?
Okay, great question. And the reason people raise that for vegans is you're not having dairy products anymore. And so people imagine that the cow is somehow a factory making calcium that gets into the milk. But cows don't make calcium. Calcium is an element in the earth. The cow didn't make it. The cow ate it as the calcium passed through the roots of the grass into the blades of the grass, and then the cow eats it. So if you eat green leafy vegetables, hopefully not grass, but broccoli or kale or collards or Brussels sprouts, you will get calcium in its natural source. There are a couple of exceptions. Spinach, chard, they have a lot of calcium, but the absorption is low. But the absorption from Brussels sprouts and broccoli and kale and collards is really high. So if you include those in your diet, you'll get a lot. There's also calcium in the legume group, the bean group. So you'll get plenty of calcium if you include these in your diet.
All right, Dr. Barnard, let's clear up a little confusion about cholesterol, shall we? This question comes to us from Marta. She wants to know, what can I do for high triglycerides and low total cholesterol and low HDL? I'm whole food, I'm plant-based, but I rarely eat junk food. So what else can Marta do?
Okay, so your triglycerides are high.
Correct.
Triglycerides are blood fats. They're little particles of fat going through the bloodstream. And years ago, we did a research study where we brought in a group of women. They were all overweight and they wanted to lose weight. So we used a low-fat vegan diet. And the weight loss was impressive. I mean, people lost weight really well. And in fact, it was a 2-year study. They kept the weight off long-term. It was great. However, what we discovered was that for most, their cholesterol levels got better, their triglycerides dropped, everything was great. But there were some where their triglycerides did elevate a bit. So we did another study. And now we did not just vegan and low fat, where you get the benefits of the weight loss and so forth, but we also went with more unprocessed foods. So instead of, say, white bread, we might pick rye bread or pumpernickel bread or something like that. What we're doing is we're choosing low glycemic index foods. And suddenly we found that triglycerides drop like a stone. So if your triglycerides are high, vegan and low fat is great. That's the first step, but you also want to get away from the high glycemic index foods. And what are those? Sugar itself. Sugar is high glycemic index. It can make your triglycerides go up. White breads and frankly, wheat breads in general will often spike triglycerides, or well, they're high glycemic index foods. That in turn can affect triglycerides. Rye bread, better choice. Pumpernickel, even better. Cold cereals, they'll raise your blood sugar, especially if there is a toy inside. So if you switch to oatmeal or bran cereal, that's a lower glycemic index, better for your triglycerides as well as your blood sugar. Fruit, surprisingly enough, is a low glycemic index choice, and fruit is good. So there you have it.
All right, Dr. Loomis, coming over to you. We got a question about a myth on juice fasting. This one comes to us, wants to know, I have a friend who said that juice fasting is not healthy, has concerns that I'm interested in trying it. This person wants to know, what do you think about 3-day juice fasts?
Well, so, you know, that's a great question, actually. And so, you know, one of the problems with juice fasting is when we eat, as Dr. Barnard just mentioned, when we eat a piece of fruit, it has a relatively low glycemic index. And the reason is that the sugar in the fruit is actually in the fruit. And when we eat the fruit, our bodies have to do physical work. We literally burn calories to help digest the fruit. And the soluble fiber in the fruit absorbs water. It slows our progression through our digestive tract. So we slowly absorb the sugar. Our insulin levels don't rise, which is the definition really of a low glycemic index food. Glycemic index is the propensity of a given food to spike your insulin levels and your sugar levels. The soluble fiber in the fruit, which I just mentioned, or vegetables, acts as a prebiotic for healthy gut bacteria down the road. So all is good. The problem is when you juice is that you break the fruit apart. And if you're juicing, you actually throw away probably, you know, some of the most healthful parts of the fruit and vegetables themselves, and that is the fiber. Now, and it also, especially with fruits, not so much vegetables, but with fruits, it also can significantly raise the glycemic index because you've now kind of pre-digested the food and made those sugars more readily available. Now, that being, and so if you're a diabetic, especially, you have to be careful. Now, that being said, if you're doing a juice fast with carrots and celery and kale and things like that, which really don't have much sugar at all, there's certainly nothing wrong with that. But you know, in my opinion, you might as well just eat the fruit and vegetables on their own, and get all the benefits from all the kind of symphony of nutrients that come in eating fruits and vegetables, as opposed to kind of selectively getting some of them and throwing away probably the best part, which is the fiber. So it's probably not adversely going to affect your health, but I'm not sure it provides a great health benefit.
I like the way you put that, symphony of nutrients. That just has a ring to it. I like that a lot. Dr. Barnard, here's a question for you. This is something that you tackled extensively in your latest book, Your Body in Balance. This is a question that comes to us from Denise. She writes, my thyroid medication dosage has been reduced twice over the last year since adopting a plant-based diet. I'm wondering if it's possible to totally heal the thyroid and not have to take medication any longer.
What a wonderful question. You're right. When I set off to write Your Body in Balance, and for those who haven't seen it, it's a book all about hormones, including thyroid hormone and estrogens and others. But in writing the part about the thyroid, I was really struck by how many people are low in thyroid. They're hypothyroid. That can be Hashimoto's thyroiditis, or in some cases, it's just an iodine deficiency. And some are the other. They have hyperthyroidism. However, we have seen exactly what you are asking about. Individuals where they changed their diet, they did what you did. They threw out the cheese pizza and the dairy and the meat and so forth, and their doctor says, I don't think you need so much medicine. And the answer to your question is yes. There are people who no longer have thyroid disease at all. But here's what we don't have. We don't have a randomized clinical trial where we bring in people who are low in thyroid and they're all taking a thyroid supplement like Synthroid. And half of them do a vegan diet and half of them don't, and we see how they do. We don't have that. Nobody's ever done it yet. And frankly, I think it would be a great study to do. What we do have is lots of individuals who have done this on their own, and what you described is what has happened to them. So what do? You have already done the right thing by changing your diet. And for those who are wondering about this, observational studies have shown that people who are on vegan diets have the least risk of either hypothyroidism or hyperthyroidism. So there's every reason to do it. But you go to your doctor. You say, I've adopted a completely plant-based diet. Monitor me as I'm changing, and let's see if I can reduce or get off my thyroid hormones. And your doctor can monitor you. So it's very safe to do under really simple medical supervision. See how you do.
All right. Sticking with you, Dr. Barnard, this is a good one because we have this group who will say that bacon's not bad and butter's not bad and hamburgers, they're not going to hurt you. But then we have all of this other science that says quite the contrary. So Eugene is wondering, what diet would you recommend for people with heart blockage?
Oh, my goodness sakes. Such an important question because the number one cause of death in this country is not yet COVID, it's heart disease. And so many people have narrowed arteries. And what really put plant-based diets on the map, I think, in the beginning was about a generation ago, Dr. Dean Ornish took people who had very narrowed arteries. And he didn't use statin drugs because they weren't part of clinical practice at that time. And he didn't do angioplasty on everybody. What he did in a carefully controlled trial that was published in The Lancet first, and then the long-term results were published in JAMA. He did 4 things: plant-based diet, vegetarian diet. It was virtually vegan, no meat at all, no eggs, very minimal amounts of dairy, but you could just leave that out. No smoking, because smoking is bad for your arteries. Everybody got physically active. They weren't really running marathons, but they were doing about a good half-hour walk every day. And they were also dealing with stress, which is why nobody was in Washington, D.C. in his study. Just kidding. After a year, not only did people lose weight and their cholesterol and so forth got better, but when they had an angiogram, which measures the trickle of blood that gets through the coronary arteries, they were opening up again in so much that you could see a measurable difference in 82% of patients. So that was accomplished without medications and without any kind of surgical procedure. So that is where you start. Now, keep in mind, this is a serious condition. Don't fire your doctor. Get good medical advice, but there is every reason to do a completely vegan diet along with the other steps that we mentioned.
All right, Dr. Loomis, coming to you for this one. Someone is wondering whether or not it's true that eating an SOS diet will affect the absorption of fat-soluble vitamins, talking about A, D, E, and K.
So first of all, for those, SOS diet is salt, oil, and sugar-free. So it really is a very clean plant-based diet that eliminates, the edible oils in addition to the processed sugars and salt. As I mentioned, I think in response to an earlier question, plant-based diets do have fat, and they've got more than enough fat in our diets there's more than enough fat in your diet, even if you're not eating processed edible oils, to absorb the fat-soluble vitamins. I mean, broccoli has fat in it. It's not very much. And again, in general, if you eat a well-balanced whole food plant-based diet, throw in a few nuts every now and then, throw in maybe a little bit of avocado, which are whole food plant-based sources of fat. You do have to be careful with those kind of foods because they are very dense in calories. But I think as part of a healthy whole food plant-based diet, I think there's nothing wrong with a limited amount of nuts and nut butters and avocado. I think they can play a role in a healthy whole food plant-based diet. So in general, unless you're really restricting your calories, there's more than enough fat in a whole food plant-based diet. Again, it runs about 10-15% for most people to absorb those kind of vitamins.
All right, Dr. Barnard, this one is for you. We've got time for just a couple of more. This is a good one. Everybody around the office loves nutritional yeast, the nooch. So Diane is wondering whether or not it is true that there is a risk to eating too much nutritional yeast.
Yeah, you're probably gonna have yellow stuff all over your shirt and whatever. No, there's there's no problems with having too much nutritional yeast. For people who don't know what we're talking about, nutritional yeast is a bright yellow. They sell it sometimes in the supplement aisle because it's very high in protein. It's often B12 fortified, but the reason people are buying it, it's none of that stuff. It's because it tastes and smells like cheese. And so people put it on pizza. They put it on their spaghetti sauce. They put it in chili. They put it on popcorn. They put it all kinds of places. And cheese has loads of fat, loads of saturated fat, hormones, but nutritional yeast doesn't have any of that. It's got some protein, got a little bit of B12, but it doesn't have any of the fat. So people love it. And no, there's no risk of having too much of it. One caution, this is not baker's yeast. This is not brewer's yeast. It's specifically nutritional yeast. Hey, Chuck, do you mind? Can I jump back in on the question, on the SOS question?
By all means.
Because while you can certainly see the idea of limiting salt and oil and sugar and so forth, obviously, there's something that I'm a little, I want people to be attentive to. And I have to say, I'm in this category. I avoid salt. I don't add salt in cooking at all. But salt happens to be one of the few vehicles for iodine. Who would think about it? You wake up in the morning, you step on the scale, and you gained a pound since last week. And your energy is not so hot. And you look in the mirror and your skin doesn't look right. There's something wrong with your hair and everything like that. You go to the doctor and the doctor says, these are non-specific symptoms, but let me do a blood test. What your doctor is thinking is that you're not getting iodine because you're avoiding iodized salt. You're not getting iodine. If you don't get iodine, your thyroid can't make thyroid hormone anymore. And so you start gaining weight, and you feel dumpy and constipated and all these things. Sea salt doesn't have iodine in it. Neither does Himalayan salt, neither does many of the kind of boutique salts out there. I'm not saying that you need salt for it. You can have iodine in sea vegetables. Actually, that's the best source of all. Nori and wakame and aramid, they're loaded with good iodine. But if you're not eating those and you're not eating iodized salt at all, you may be at risk for running low in iodine. So also iodine supplements that you can take. So it should not be an issue. But for all my SOS friends out there, do think about making sure you have a source of iodine. You need it for healthy thyroid. That's another tip from your body and balance. So I just want people to put on their radar.
So go pick up a copy of that book. It's on Amazon right now. It's a phenomenal read. Cannot recommend that enough. Dr. Loomis, final question is for you. And if there is ever anybody out there that is made to answer this one, it is you, my friend, because the debate rages on between plant-based athletes and meat-eating athletes. And so Plant Fit Meg is wondering, are there studies comparing athletic performance and recovery in plant-based athletes versus omnivores?
So there's not a lot of research, but there is some. And in general, what they've shown is that endurance athletes who follow a plant-based diet may actually have a slight advantage. They seem to be, if you take the groups of people and match them to their VO2 max, to their kind of cardiovascular fitness level, if you're an endurance athlete, that in fact plant-based diets may provide a slight performance benefit. And the theory is it's a combination of the high carbohydrate diet, which we need to replenish the glycogen stores we burn when we exercise, as well as it's highly anti-inflammatory, so it helps you recover from long runs and get rid of some of the muscle stiffness and soreness, so you can perform at a higher level, each time you go out and train. For strength trained athletes, the research suggests that although there may not be a performance advantage, that there's no decrease in performance. In other words, plant-based strength trained athletes compared to omnivorous strength trained athletes show no difference in strength gain, performance, and such as that. So you're not going to hurt your performance if you're a strength trained athlete. But you are going to improve your health. And it's going to, help the environment. There's a lot of other benefits we get from when we switch toward a plant-based diet. And if you're an endurance-based athlete, there may in fact be a slight performance advantage.
All right. Dr. Loomis, Dr. Barnard, appreciate your time clearing up all of these questions for us today. Appreciate you more than you will ever know, my friends.
Thank you, Chuck.
Thanks, Chuck. Thanks for having us.
Anytime, my friend. You are welcome back. We'll do it again soon. If we did not get to your question today, have no fear. We will save it and do our best to get you an answer on an upcoming episode. You have my word on that. And also, if you have a question that you would like to ask Dr. Loomis or any one of our doctors or dietitians privately, you can do that at the Barnard Medical Center. All you need to do is visit barnardmedical.org or pick up the phone and call 202-527-7500 to schedule an appointment. Telemedicine appointments, as a matter of fact, available now in more than a quarter of the country. So barnardmedical.org or call 202-527-7500 to get going on your healthier tomorrow. And it is indeed finally Victory Friday here on the Exam Room Live, and we are celebrating a major win in our fight to keep animals out of labs. The EPA this week announcing a new policy that will save the lives of hundreds of rabbits every single year, sparing them from undergoing painful chemical experiments known as LD50 tests. For years, we at the Physicians Committee have been urging the EPA to put an end to these cruel procedures, and our voices this week are being heard. And someone intimately involved in the fight is Kristie Sullivan. She's the Vice President of Research Policy at the Physicians Committee, and she is here now with much more. Kristie, thank you so very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so this is big news. Let's start with the LD50 test. Can you tell us what they are and what this means moving forward?
Yeah. So people might not know that every pesticide and some cleaning products that go onto the market, so this could be pesticides used on the farm, could be pesticides at Home Depot, your ant spray, that kind of stuff, or antibacterial cleaning products, are required to be tested in a whole list of toxicology tests before they can go on the market. And then the EPA gets that information and decides, yes, it's probably safe, maybe not safe. So we, for a long time, have been working to try to get rid of the animal tests that are on those lists. And most of them are animal tests, but we're seeing some changes now. We're implementing some non-animal tests. But another way that we can change these requirements and save animals is just to have people stop doing one of those tests, right? So the lethal dose 50 test is actually 3 different tests that every pesticide is tested in. And what those tests involve and what they're designed to do basically is to see how much chemical will kill about half the population. So how lethal, how dangerous is this chemical? And so they have 3 different tests where they force animals to ingest chemicals through a tube down their throat, or they force animals to inhale the chemicals, or they shave rabbit's skin and put the chemicals on their skin. And the tests go on until they find at least half of the animals in a particular group have died from exposure to those chemicals. And as you can imagine, that's extremely painful to go through all of the effects of those chemicals. So what we announced this week is that EPA has released a new draft policy that says companies can avoid doing one of those tests. And it's very, very exciting. And sometimes it's hard to think about how many animals this impacts. So think about one of those cute little rabbits that you've seen, the cutest rabbit that you've seen, the little floppy ears and the twitching nose. And imagine 750 of those rabbits every single year will not be tested on, will not be killed in these tests. So this is a big week because the EPA has taken away this requirement and said that companies don't have to do this test anymore.
Now, you said that this was a draft policy. Does that mean that it's not quite yet in full effect?
Companies can follow the guidance right now. So companies can stop doing the test. They need to put out a policy as a draft and get public comment. So of course, we'll be commenting that we think this is a good idea, and it'll be about 30 days, and then they'll finalize the policy. But companies can start following it right now.
But we're pretty confident this is going through.
Yes, exactly.
Outstanding. And as a matter of fact, this isn't the first time that we've actually scored a victory when it comes to these LD50 tests, is it?
No, actually, in fact, EPA has released sort of a slew of new policies taking away certain requirements for tests. And people might wonder, well, what does that exactly mean? So basically what we've said is, okay, you have 3 of these tests. Maybe you don't actually need all 3 of those tests. Maybe you can just use 2 of them for the time being. And so that's what they've done, is that they looked back at our urging and urging of other animal groups. They've looked back and said, oh, actually, it turns out that we're getting this data in and we're not even using it to make a risk assessment decision. So they just take away the requirement. And they've done that in July. They took away a requirement for fish tests that saves 220 fish every year. In February, they took away a bird test that saves 750 birds every year. And in 2016, which is sort of one of the very first times that they did this, was they took away this dermal test for many rabbits. This is sort of an expansion this year of the 2016 policy that said that that saved about 5,000 animals every year. So we're seeing a very deliberative march towards fewer and fewer animals being used in tests every single year. It really adds up.
And so I know previously when we've talked about animals being used in labs, there have been other methods that are available. And if these tests are being deemed irrelevant, more or less, would I be correct to assume that there are alternatives already in place?
Well, actually, in this case, they just have said we don't need this information anymore. So they don't need to replace it with anything else. You're right, though. In other cases, there are in vitro methods that can be used. Skin allergy is one of them, to see if a chemical causes skin allergy. And that has been replaced. In 2018, we worked with the EPA to get a replacement test there, so that now chemicals can be tested with human skin cell tests that will give us better information than the mouse test that was previously used.
All right, so victory today, but we still have much more work to do. So let me ask you this, Kristie. Somebody's watching this right now. How does their contribution to the Physicians Committee go to help us continue these efforts?
So what we do, we have a team of scientists that work directly with the Environmental Protection Agency scientists, with chemical company scientists, behind the scenes to pull together, all the different stakeholders that are involved and all their different needs, and make sure that we can do whatever needs to be done in order to get these replacement policies through. So whether it be training staff or maybe funding some more scientific work, writing papers in the scientific literature to support the policies. We're doing all of that right now behind the scenes, actually, for a number of other endpoints. So we'll have more news to come if we can continue our work in 2021.
All right. Well, Kristie Sullivan, thank you so very much. And if you want to support the work that Kristie and her team are going to continue to do into the future, please go to pcrm.org/donate to contribute. Every little bit goes to help. So, Kristie, congratulations on the big victory. Can't wait to see what's next.
Thank you so much.
All right. And if you enjoyed today's show, please go ahead and like the Physicians Committee on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. And don't forget also, as long as you're in the subscribing mood, head over to Apple Podcast or Spotify, wherever you get your favorite shows from. Subscribe to the Exam Room Podcast by the Physicians Committee, and also leave a 5-star rating if you would be so kind. And every single subscription and 5-star rating indeed helps us make the world a healthier place. Quick programming note before we wrap things up. We will be off on Monday to celebrate the holidays, so be sure to join us back here at Tuesday at noon Eastern Time on Facebook and on YouTube, when I will be joined by Dr. Hana Kaliova. Just published a new study. I mean, we are talking hot off the presses, a study on the reward circuitry in your brain and how your brain can just light up like a Christmas tree when it reacts to certain foods. So she did this incredible study about that. We will be discussing that Tuesday right back here on the Exam Room Live. But until then, we are fresh out of time, my friends. I want to say thank you again to Kristie Sullivan for joining us, as well as the plant-based posse behind the scenes that makes the show possible. And a special big thanks to you who is watching right now, my exam roomie. I appreciate you as well. And on behalf of Doctors Neal Barnard and Jim Loomis and everyone here at the Physicians Committee, I am the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll. Have yourself a great weekend. We'll talk to you again soon. And until then, stay safe, take a stand, and keep it plant-based.